Good morning, dear participants and dear organizers. Good morning to all of you. I mean, particularly the coordinator of this program, this 5-day online FDP on organizational behavior, organized by the Department of Management, Mizoram University, and sponsored by AICT Training and Learning Academy, Atal. So this is a 5-day program. We all know practically this will be the 10th session, if I remember well.
Yes.
Because by tomorrow evening we must wind up. And so I am very much grateful to the coordinator, Dr. Amit Kumar Singh, the head Department of Management, Mizoram University, and the coordinator of this program, and Dr. Vidhukanti Das, the co-coordinator, also of Department of Management, Mizoram University, and also to all the participants, and also my good friend in your department, Professor L.S. Sharma. I have many good friends in your department, but 3 names are before me in your program, and also my good friends from the Commerce Department. I think they have taken their sessions, Professor Jyoti Kumar and Professor Bharatendu Singh yesterday. So, and all my good friends in the Department of Management, respect to your Honorable Vice Chancellor in absentia, respect to Professor Niharika Vora in absentia. I heard our session carefully. I have learned a lot from our discussion. In fact, our discussion will follow, taking a cue from her discussion. So, dear participants, what I could gather from Dr. Amit Kumar Singh, that you are from all over the country, about 200 in number, and few of you are research scholars, but practically all of you are management teachers, maybe in government or private institutions, aided or unaided, all over the country. So I am not in a position to know your specializations right now. Maybe some of you are teaching systems, some of you marketing, some of you HR, some of you finance, etc., etc. And usually in all the management programs, organizational behavior or organization behavior is a common and compulsory paper, maybe in semester 1 or semester 2. So dear friends, those who are already teaching organizational behavior or doing research in organizational behavior in some area, for them our discussion will be a bit elementary. But friends, there may be other participants, those who are teaching management papers, they may not be teaching organizational behavior. So keeping the heterogeneity of the team, I have designed the program accordingly, a bit elementary, bit advanced, bit in between. And for the last 15 minutes, we will try to respond to your queries and questions or to your clarifications, if any. So friends, one thing, when I was carefully going through the program schedule, I mean for 5 days, 5 into 3, 15 sessions, except the session by Professor Niharika Vora and the concluding session, which will be tomorrow, will to be addressed by Professor Nimit Chaudhary and our good friend Professor G.P. Prasad. All other sessions are strictly according to the framework of organizational behavior. Agreed. To my understanding, because AICT has designed the program, we are not going to say anything more beyond their design. To my understanding, if we follow Professor Niharika Vora properly, and she is a leading personality in the field of organizational behavior all over the world, and if we follow the famous book by Robbins, Stephen P. Robbins, right now 2 other co-authors, Timothy A. Judge and our good friend Professor Niharika Vora, the way they have designed the entire course meant for the management teachers, there is a chapter on power and politics. I mean organizational power and politics. And they have dealt with organizational power in much detail. We will follow that pattern because most of you are management teachers or would be management teachers, already teaching organizational behavior or will be teaching organizational behavior today or tomorrow. So better to follow the structure given by this internationally famous book. Whenever we talk in terms of organizational behavior, always Robbins will come in our mind. Now we are very happy for the Indian edition. Professor Niharika Vora has joined based on our extensive experience all over the world. So we will follow that. So in a very simple manner, friends, we will start. But the theme has been given by AICTE. We should not deviate from that. Power and influence of group. Okay, fine. Now, in the management literature or the literature on organizational behavior, the words power and influence have been used rather interchangeably. So we will also use that. Don't misunderstand. Sometimes the way people speak English, sometimes we'll be using the word power, sometimes influence. Don't get confused. And at the end of our discussion, we'll try to relate organizational power a little bit with organizational politics. And then, because the very next session is on organizational culture, I will just touch upon the role of power in organizational culture, and then our next resource person will take over. So friends, let us start in a very simple manner. Just think in terms of organization. Unseen, invisible. Within the organization, there are so many individuals. Now, individuals, they form so many groups. So if we talk in terms of interactions, interaction between individual and individual, interaction between individual and group, interaction between group and group, interaction between group and organization, and finally the interaction between one organization and another organization. And friends, remember, the people keep on changing, not in terms of their presence or absence, in terms of their views, in terms of their position, in terms of their experience and qualification. So in a way, groups also keep on changing. In a way, organizations also keep on changing. So that's why, in a way, these type of interactions, so far as individuals, groups, and organizations, these will keep on changing. That's our background. If you remember, excellent lecture delivered by Professor Niharika Vora, again and again, she tried to draw our attention to context of organizational behavior. She talked about small o, organization, she talked about small b, she talked about OB, and finally, with the help of certain cases, she tried to draw our attention to the role of these organizational behavior in the changing context. And if I could learn properly from her, one thing she has mentioned again and again, increasingly we should go beyond the normative approach. Increasingly we should go beyond the normative approach to understand the phenomenon or the phenomena around us. And the organization must behave accordingly. Keeping that background in mind, talking in terms of the individuals and groups taken together, we come to the term power. In a very simplistic manner, friends, it is already known to you. Say, I am A, I want to have some power, I want to exercise power, you are B. I am interested in exercising power over you. So the whole definition of power is that to what extent, how, when E can influence the behavior of B. Why I am trying to influence the behavior of B? I am A. Because I think deep in my heart, sometimes explicitly, sometimes implicitly, that B will act according to my wish, according to my desire, according to my understanding of the situation. But it is not a very simple thing, friends. Just because I want B to act according to my wish, that may not work. So I must have some capacity or potential. Here lies the definition of power. In our way, in a very simplistic manner, we can call it, it is a capacity or potential of A to influence the behavior of B so that B acts according to A's desires. So then comes, B becomes dependent. So power is as a function of dependence. In management literature, the word dependence will come again and again. Now, I am A, for example. Dear, a particular past participant, you are B, for example. My power will increase on what? To the extent you become dependent on me. And to the extent your dependence increases, your dependence on me, then my power will increase. Now, what is the background of this dependence? For example, I am giving a very crude example. I am the superior, for example A, you are the subordinate, for example B. I have given you some threat that if you don't work properly or like that or according to my desire or wish, you are going to lose your job. So if you think that you have no other alternative, somehow you have to retain your job, then you will accept whatever I am saying. So something I am controlling, something I am possessing, and which you consider important. You do not want to lose your job. But take the other alternative. You may simply think it doesn't matter. Whether my job is there or whether I lose my job doesn't matter. Then you have more alternatives. Then your perception regarding the alternatives may be different. If you consider retaining the job as very important, you will behave in one way. You will remain more dependent on me. If you consider that losing the job doesn't matter, you will not remain dependent on me. So my ability, for example, is A, imaginary A. My ability to control you, my ability to make you dependent, that depends to a very large possibilities. That what are the alternatives you are perceiving and what type of alternative you are giving importance. Because I've given a very crude example from superior subordinate or subordinate. Take the case of parents. I want to have a higher education. But if the parents do not fund me, I'm a young person, I do not have any job. I cannot get admission in a college or I cannot pursue the course. So I become dependent on parents. Or the teachers, if they do not teach me, if they decide that they will not teach me, I need to go beyond. I have no option. Or if the college does not give me the admission, I have no options. I become dependent. But if I think that I don't bother about these things, whether parents are giving me money or not, whether the boss becomes instrumental in losing my job, doesn't matter, whether the teacher teaches me, doesn't matter, then I will not be dependent. Then the boss, the teacher, the parents, they will not have any power, that much of power. So the power is related much to dependence. That's a very simple thing we have already discussed. Now, friends, let us come to the other issue. Let us come to other issue. In management literature, in OP literature, there is some discussion on leadership and power. Friends, this is not a session on leadership. If I remember well, there was a full session on leadership. We are not going to discuss leadership. But the point is that leaders also use power to attain their group objectives. That part is important. So power does not always depend on good compatibility between leader and follower. It may so happen. In leadership, there is a good compatibility between leader and followers. But power does not always depend on that. If there is a good compatibility, fine. Even if there is not a good compatibility, the followers will accept if the followers think that this alternative is very important. So the dependence of the followers will really matter. But we are not going to discuss leadership as such. Leadership, there are so many theories of leadership, perhaps those have been discussed. Leadership requires some sort of goal conference between the leader and the followers. So leadership focuses on certain thing. This thing I will come later on. Later on, I will be using three terms: upward influence, downward influence, lateral or horizontal influence. When we are talking in terms of leadership, leadership focuses on the downward influence. As the leader is in superior position, the followers are bit downward. So the importance of this upward influence and the importance of lateral influence are there, but are not that much when you talk in terms of leadership, but enough with leadership. Leadership research emphasizes on style of leadership, enough of discussion on style of leadership, maybe in other session. But the research on power we have come across, they focus on certain tactics. We'll elaborate these power tactics only after some time. Why the superior or A will be using tactics? Because A is always interested in gaining compliance from B, in making B dependent. So certain power tactics are used. So I may be an individual, I may be a part of a group. So whether groups or individuals, they always try to use power to control other individuals and groups. That's a broad understanding of our management literature. Now, friends, we will elaborate these points again later on. In management literature, they have used the term bases of power or sources of power. It's a very interesting question. Then the question comes, where does the power come from? How does an individual or a group influence others or exercise power over others? In the organizational behavior literature, power bases are classified into two groups. Friends, we will elaborate this for some time. One group is popularly known as formal power. The other group is popularly known as personal power. Now, when I talk in terms of formal power, say you are the superior in an organization, you are the head of the department, you are the principal or director of the institute, you are enjoying some organizational position, and you are enjoying some formal authority. The authority, the gatekeeper of your institution will not enjoy. So because you are enjoying this formal authority, you develop certain quality, certain ability. These things we will elaborate. When you talk in terms of formal power, we will go farther down. We will mention about three types of formal power: coercive power, reward power, and legitimate power. Let us elaborate these things a little bit. These will come again and again. Coercive, you know the English meaning of coercion or coercive, putting pressure. For example, I am the subordinate. You are the boss. So I have a fear that if I fail to comply, you may take some action against me. So I have a fear that I have developed regarding the negative result which may come from failing to comply. So this fear will make me dependent on you. I am the subordinate, you are the boss. And fine, sometimes we have seen the superior can go for some sort of threats. Superior can give me physical pain, psychological pain. Superior can impose certain restrictions on my movement. Superior can control some of my basic needs. So, and there are so many other job-related issues where superior can do something which will not be palatable for me, bit unpleasant for me, bit embarrassing for me, but I will have to accept it because I consider my job as very valuable. That's why I become very much dependent. You have seen, I am giving one very delicate example. Sometimes we have seen that one person tries to heckle another person. This another person is engaged in some important job, and that another person requires some information. But the other person, maybe the boss or maybe the colleague or maybe the subordinate, he or she may suppress that key information. Therefore, this dependent person will not be able to do that properly. So sometimes in the organizational situation, I've seen that taking away important papers. So next day when you come to office, you do not find that paper and you won't be able to finish your job. Now your boss will call you and boss will scold you. So very delicate situation. I have given you a few examples on this, how the coercive power is used, because I suffer from a feeling that if I fail to comply, that will result in negative result, and then the superior will call me useless and may scold me, may demote me, may stop my increment, may transfer me, and so on. Forget about losing the job. But just the reverse is that reward power, almost opposite to coercive power. Say, based on my position, I can achieve certain results because I can distribute certain rewards. And this will become successful when the others consider those rewards as valuable. But if the subordinate thinks that it doesn't matter whether he gets promotion or not, whether she gets increment or not, then it will not work. But if the other person, in our language, the dependent person, considers that reward as valuable, maybe financial reward, maybe non-financial reward, and if the person, the superior, for example, has the ability to distribute it, then the superior can exercise some power. Superior can achieve compliance from the dependent. So this reward power is psychologically almost opposite to your coercive power. And the third power we have just mentioned, which covers really both, but we should not go beyond the international management understanding. When we talk in terms of formal power, we use three terms, sub-terms: coercive power, reward power, legitimate power. In fact, in a way, legitimate means which is legally valid. Legitimate powers in a way covers both coercive and reward power, but it is something more than that. I say I am enjoying legitimate power because of my position. The vice chancellor of your university or the director of your institute will enjoy more legitimate power than you or me, you or myself. So this, in the formal structure, in the group or the organization, some people enjoy legitimate power, maybe the group leader, maybe the organizational top boss, and so on. So coercive power and reward power can be effectively exercised if the other person is enjoying legitimate power. That part is important. But in management literature, in OB literature, this legitimate power is a broader term than just coercive power and reward power. Because legitimate power gives me the formal authority to control the organizational resources. That may be money, that may be anything else. To use the organizational resources to the extent which I can enjoy, the others may not. So the dependent member may be a superior sometimes, maybe a subordinate, maybe a colleague. The dependent members ultimately accept my positional authority, which is sometimes expressed openly, explicitly. Sometimes you expressed in a very subtle manner, implicitly, implied manner, informally, very softly. So if you are my boss, even if you make a very gentle request, really speaking, it is as good as an order in my case. Not that you are using harsh language, you are treating me in a tough manner, but even informal use of your behavior, soft words from the authority position, friends, really matter something. Now coming back to the other category. There are two bases of power we have just mentioned, one formal power, one personal power. The formal power we have elaborated a little bit, we will come again and again throughout our discussion. Under formal power, coercive power, your reward power, and taken together something more, legitimate power. When you come to personal power, there are again two categories within the personal power. We'll just elaborate. One we call expert power, other we call referent power. Now the personal power, friends, take an example. Many a times we have seen there are very competent, productive people who have power, but they are not enjoying formal authority. But still people go to them, still people seek their advice. I have seen in many situations, the boss far above the line can skip so many layers and can come down to a subordinate far down the line because the boss knows that subordinate is really competent in that particular work. So this is a very key example of personal power, which many people up the ladder may not have, but he or she may be having. So this personal power is coming from individuals' unique characteristics. So in the early years, friends, nowadays all of us have become a bit used to using computers and all that. If we go back 10, 20, 30 years back, there was a time, I've seen in many organizations, that the subordinate far down the line, a young person is very competent in handling computers, but a very senior, knowledgeable boss far above the line, no doubt about it. Maybe a senior person, aged person. During their days, the computer use was not there. So even for making use of computer, they are seeking help of this person far down the line. Personal power, very important, unique characteristics. Now under the personal power, there are two categories. One we call expert power, other we call referent power. Expert power is very simple. For example, we depend on physicians, we depend on computer experts, we depend on tax experts. The government sometimes depend on the economists. We depend on, nowadays people have so many psychological problems, we depend on the psychologists. The way Professor Niharika Vora was discussing that day, you will appreciate definitely in the field of organizational behavior, psychology, sociology, these things play a major role. So therefore, some person can exercise influence based on their skills and knowledge as a result of expertise, which he or she may have, we may not have. So expert power, we need to go to them. And then the other category is referent power. I will give you one very simple example after 2-3 minutes. Imagine, particularly it happens too much in our childhood days, we are influenced by some important people. known people, public personalities, and we try to identify ourselves with them. At the young age, when we were watching we were listening to the running commentary of the test cricket, many a times I thought that, oh, if I can become one Gary Sobers. That's not possible. When we were hearing one music, oh, if I could play the instrument like him or her. So very interesting. So some persons have some desirable resources, some personal traits. And in a way, psychologically, we are identified with them. And in the process of identification, we are influenced by them. So what happens, friends? Gradually, we develop a sort of liking, we develop a sort of respect, sort of admiration. We like to please them, we like to imitate them. In a very simple language, you can call it, we develop a sort of likability. If we watch the young kids after coming back from school, they try to teach their parents the way they have learned from their teachers in the school. And the parents enjoy the situation. That means they have developed a sort of liking, respect, admiration, whatever you call it. So far as their teachers are concerned, they are imitating their teachers. So gradually, we try to identify ourselves throughout our life, in different phases of our life, with some persons who have some desirable resources, who have some personal traits. And this happens throughout our life. Our association, our liking for a country, our liking for a particular football club, our liking for a person, a person who has never touched the bat of a cricket, he or she may also think, oh, if I would have been one Sachin Tendulkar, I could have scored such and so many centuries. These things happen. So what is that? Those peoples are acting as sort of a referent power in our life. I give you one a very simple example. Sometimes back, that advertisement is not that much in circulation nowadays. You know, once the India's cricket captain Sourav Ganguly. So Sourav Ganguly is advertising for so many products. I enjoyed one advertisement that is about Horlicks. Sourav Ganguly is advertising that if you drink Horlicks for different categories, for children, for male, for female and others, we will get physical strength and stamina. Fine, beautiful. But you see, whatever Sourav Ganguly is saying while advertising Horlicks, if we are taken there by the company to advertise, we can also say the same thing. But people will not listen to us because people have developed a sort of identification with, for example, here in our example, with India's former captain Sourav Ganguly. So if Sourav Ganguly says that take Horlicks or take the full egg, the parents, the mothers may be influenced by that. But the same thing if people like, we say people may not take it. The very impact of referent power we must accept when you're talking in terms of power. So then comes the question, which basis of power? Formal power or informal power? Under formal power, coercive power, reward power, legitimate power, or under personal power, expert power or referent power, which is most effective? It depends. Research indicates, you see friends, research only, but the real life situation may vary from the research output. I'm just mentioning research in organizational behavior. Research has indicated that usually personal sources of power are more effective. I am not saying only effective. It depends. Sometimes if I am very much satisfied with you, you are my supervisor, with your style of supervision, then it has been observed that I will develop more or better commitment towards the organization. My performance will be better and more. So personal power has got some role to play, no doubt about it. But if we go down in the details of the formal power, it has been observed that research, that reward power or legitimate power are not that much related. That means the formal power is not in the driver's seat. Driver's seat is in personal power, not formal power. And again, the research has indicated that coercive power can actually backfire. it is most of the time it is negatively related. So as now, before we proceed further, dear participants, so we have tried to understand the concept of power, the concept of influence, the concept of dependence, and then different bases of power. We have not still come to the power tactics in particular. And we have talked about dependence or dependent. Before we proceed further, let us elaborate this dependence point a bit further. Usually, you will become dependent on me because you require that and what I am possessing or controlling. Otherwise, not become dependent. So if the situation is that you are dependent or there is dependence, that will increase my power, no doubt about it. But again, put it in the other way. If something you are asking for, you are a dependent person, something you are asking for that is plentiful. So in that case, you will not depend only on me. And if you do not depend only on me, that will not increase my power. So the more you can expand your options, the more, first of all, whether you require that or not, physically or psychologically. The second, if that is in short supply or that is plentiful. If you have many other sources to get that, that means you can expand your options. And then my power will go down. So dependence depends on three components, which we'll elaborate. One is important. I'm using the textbook language by Robbins. The other is scarce. And the third one is non-substitutable. I'll elaborate. Importance. If something nobody wants, I'm having something. I'm having huge money, or I'm having expert knowledge in a particular field, like a Nobel laureate. But if nobody wants what I have, then certainly that will not create any dependence. So I've given one extreme example. If nobody wants what I have, then that is not going to create dependence of the other person on me. And what happens in the organizational life? There are so many problems at all levels, at all layers, in all functional areas, and so on. And there are so many uncertainties relating to marketing, relating to production, relating to HR, finance, and so on. And we want to reduce uncertainty, we want to avoid uncertainty. So we try to find out a person, we look for a person who, using his or her expertise, can absorb this uncertainty. And if I'm a person who knows finance very well, or HR very well, or marketing very well, then in those problem situations, I will be of much use for the organization. That means I can absorb uncertainty, I will become important. I give you the example of two leading companies. I've taken it from the book by Robbins, very important examples. Friends, you know the names of two leading companies. One is Procter & Gamble, we call it P&G. Other, Matsushita, Japanese company. You see, Procter & Gamble is mainly engaged in marketing activities. Procter & Gamble has got so many other activities. Not that they do not have finance activities or HR activities. But they are more focused on marketing certain products, mainly consumer goods. Matsushita is more using the technical knowledge. So if it is Procter & Gamble, for example, this example may not be oversimplistic example, then the marketing people, marketing experts may get more importance. I am not saying surely. Say in case of Matsushita, the technology people, the engineering people, and the engineering departments may get more importance. In another study, we have come across that in most of the American companies, the people who are at the topmost level, most of them have finance background. It has been seen that those companies are doing extremely well when the finance is the main issue, financial management. But in case of many Japanese companies and German companies, technology is very important. So people who are having engineering background, technology background, they're doing extremely well. But these are extreme examples. We should not interpret these examples in a very mechanical manner. Just I have made the example simpler and put it in the extreme ends of the continuum just to make our understanding more clear, more focused. Now, enough discussion on importance. Now, if we come to scarcity, this point, friends, we have already covered. If the resource is scarce, then well, I will be able to dominate, I will be able to exercise power. If the is the abundance of resource, I will not have that much of an advantage, I will not gain that much of power. Take a very simple example. You put it in scarcity dependence relationship. Take the case of supply of labor and demand for labor. If the demand for labor is very high and supply of labor is very low, then the labor force as a whole can exercise more power in terms of wages and other benefits. But if you put it in the other way, supply of labor is more, demand for labor is less, then perhaps the labor force will accept the terms and conditions given by the employers, maybe in terms of salary, maybe in terms of the working conditions and so on. In the present Indian situation, we should not enter into politics. If we look into the acts relating to labor passed in the parliament, 4 labor codes, almost all other labor acts and labor legislation, these are not going to exist. You see, the economic situation is such that the employers have enjoyed so much of power, the employers are enjoying so much of power that the workforce is going to accept any amount of wages, whatever may be the working hour. In fact, the employers can remove them just so as a mere wish is concerned. If you have less than 300 workers, no notice or retrenchment will be necessary. What we read in earlier days, industrial disputes and all that, those are not going to exist. So forget about that. We are not discussing the government policy. Many knowledgeable people are there to lead the country. We are discussing this scarcity dependence relationship, and with a very simple example, supply of labor and demand for labor. Now, this non-substitutability. Now, I am A. If I have got something for which there are only very few or fewer viable substitutes, then I will enjoy more power. If that has got many substitutes, then I will not enjoy that much of power. I've taken one example from the book by Robbins, Madam Niharika Vora and others. Take the case of university or academic institutions, higher education institutions. You know, nowadays, for your promotion, increment and all that, the faculty members must have more publications. And in the American universities, the famous language is there, term is there, you publish or perish. So naturally, it has been observed that the professors or the faculty members who have more publications, they enjoy more academic power. They enjoy more bargaining power even. Other institutions are more interested to recruit them. But compared to them, if some other faculty members, they do not have that much of publications and like that, in terms of this, they're quite weak in knowledge power. They do not have that much of power. So put it in this way, whether the resource we are talking about is substitutable or not. If it is largely non-substitutable, if it is largely indispensable, then we enjoy more power, no doubt about it. Now, we have come to our point for today's discussion, that is about power tactics. Before we come to power tactics, dear participants, let us go back to the basics of management for the time being. In the management, we start with certain basic functions of management like planning, organizing, directing, coordinating, controlling. I am not repeating. When we start with planning, we start with vision, mission, policy, procedure, program, strategy, tactics, and then budget. So tactic we call strategy in a miniature form. Today I am going to office. I find that in a road there is traffic jam. I divert. I take another road. This is tactical. This may not be relevant tomorrow or even after a few hours. So power bases are quite fundamental, long-term, structural. But we develop and make use of tactics maybe by one individual, maybe by one group. That depends on that particular situation. Now we are going, there's a background of this using the power tactics on the singular sense tactic. Now the question comes, what power tactics do people use? What are the options before us when we talk in terms of using power tactics? Because as an individual in the organization, as an individual, as a member of the group, as a member of the organization, I try to influence my superiors, I try to influence my colleagues, I try to influence my subordinates. So actually, in a way, knowingly or unknowingly, not that all of us are expert in the field of organizational behavior, we are using some sort of power tactics. So it is important to know what are the popular tactical options before us, and what are the conditions which will make one tactic more appropriate than the other tactic. All tactics are not equally relevant in all situations, that we must keep in mind. So far as the research in the field of organizational behavior, the research has suggested there are 9 distinct power tactics. I'm first just mentioning that, then we will come to these points again and again. I'm not deviating from the terms used by the internationally famous textbooks. As a student of organizational behavior, I do not have that much of audacity or that much of knowledge to go beyond whatever the experts have written, say by Robbins, Timothy Judge, Niharika Bohra and others. So I am not deviating from the language they have used. Later on, I will mention about the textbook and the way Professor Niharika Bohra, she was discussing that day. In her book, these terms are there only in this form. So I thought that it will be proper for me, sensible for me, if we stick to these terms and then try to explain. Out of 9 power tactics, one is legitimacy, legal, something coming very close to the word legal, status. So legitimacy depends on the authority position. The legitimacy of your vice chancellor will be more than the legitimacy of the gatekeeper, no doubt about it. So I am a person working in that particular organization. So if a request is coming from the vice chancellor or the director, then I must understand that this is a request which is matching with the existing organizational policies and rules. So legitimacy is a particular type of power tactic which are largely being used by people in the authority position, maybe sometimes in a very explicit manner, sometimes in a very implicit, informal, soft manner. But legitimacy matters. Rational persuasion. Persuasion means trying to convince. So we are not agreeing on a particular point. Now I am presenting logical arguments, I am providing factual evidence just to demonstrate that my request is reasonable. That happens in human life. That is another power tactic. Inspirational appeal. So you are my target. You are dependent on me. Say you are my subordinate, superior or colleague. You have certain values, you have certain needs, you have certain hopes, you have certain aspirations. Now I am trying to develop some sort of emotional commitment. How? By appealing to your values, needs, hopes and aspirations. That part is important. Inspirational appeal. Sometimes we find that the important public personalities, the important political personalities, they appeal to the countrymen in an inspirational manner. So that part is very important. So if you hear one prime minister is saying that country has been attacked by the foreigners, so we must be all united to protect our country. Whether the foreigners have attacked or not, that is another issue. There's the defense people, they only know the facts. People like you and me, we do not know the facts. But the problem is that when we get this type of inspirational appeal from very public personalities, we get inspired. Oh, our country is in great danger, so we must be united. We must do this or do that. We must forego our salary. We must work for 4 more hours or like that, whatever it might be. Don't go into the details. And the issue is not political. The issue here is inspirational. And there can be many other leading personalities. I have given the example simply to understand it from the field of political world, simply to understand. Then the next point is, next power tactic is consultation. See, I am the superior, you are the subordinate. I want your support because I want to do something. Now, for the purpose of increasing your support, I involve you in deciding how to accomplish the plan. I have made a plan, so I want to accomplish the plan. And for this purpose, I require your cooperation, I require your support. And I can increase your support if I can involve you directly in deciding how to accomplish the plan. Participative management, things are known to us. Consultation, a very important, power tactics. Sometimes the government participates in the consultation process between the employers and the employees. So consultation process is very important. Next, exchange. We know the English meaning of exchange very well. So you are my target. I want to make you dependent. I want to exercise power over you. So I want to reward you with certain benefits, with certain favors in exchange for following a request. I am making you a request, and in exchange, I am providing, I am offering you certain benefits and favors, and that is some sort of reward power, part of the formal power. So that happens in human life. Another thing, not exactly inspirational appeal, this we call in management literature personal appeal. Say you are my good friend or you are very loyal to me, and I'm asking for some compliance, that you please help me, you please support me, you please give your vote in my favor when I will move this proposal. Asking for compliance and using my friendship and loyalty. Friendship and loyalty relationship is very important in making personal appeal. Then I'm using another term. I will explain this term very well. Ingratiation. First, let me give the example, then I'll explain the term. So before I make any request, I'm requesting you to do something, fine. I'm not very sure whether you will agree to my request or not. So some sort of flattery I am using. I'm using praise. I'm using friendly behavior. So ingratiation is something, a psychological concept where I want to impress you. That's very important. I want to increase my likability. That you like me or not, that is another issue. If you like me, fine. Even if you don't like me or do not like me to that extent, I want to increase this likability. You start liking me more before asking you to do a difficult thing. This is not fair in human life, but this happens. If I use flattery, if I use praise, if I use friendly behavior, usually things work because you are also one human being. You get impressed. Then I come to a very negative type of power tactic: pressure. Very coercive power, related with coercive power. Using warnings, using repeated demands, using threats. As a superior, I am doing all these things. Warnings, repeated demands, repeated threats, and all that. Even it may so happen I'm the subordinate. In an organized labor union, I am saying something which is some sort of warning to the employer, some sort of repeated demand, some sort of threat that if we don't get it, we'll stop work or like that. Putting pressure, it always backfires in the long run. In management literature, in OB literature, pressure has never been praised, but pressure is a particular form of your formal power. We cannot ignore it altogether. It is very much there in human life. Sometimes it works, but not in the long run. Another power tactic we are talking about, coalition. Say, I want to get your support. I want to get your aid. And then I want to persuade you so that you agree to my request. For doing that, I am using the support from some other person. I am using the aid from some other person. It happens interestingly. We have become used to the term coalition in political world. Imagine one party is claiming that the party after the election can form the government. Fine, but the governor has said that you have to show your strength, and I am not very sure about proving my strength in the assembly floor. So I am trying to get the support or aid from other like-minded parties so that taken together, I will be able to prove the majority of my party there before the governor. So in coalition politics, the word coalition has become a common vocabulary in the political world. But come to our field, very specific. That is, I want to persuade you to agree to my proposal or request, and for doing that, I am enlisting the support or aid from others. These are the 9 basic power tactics. Now comes the debate. Some power tactics are more effective than others. Then which are the power tactics which are more effective than others? The experts say rational persuasion, inspirational appeal, and consultation. Usually these have been found to be more effective. And particularly when the other party, the target, the dependent, is highly interested in the outcome of a decision process. Say there is negotiation between employers and employees, and the government is there as a third party. Then both the parties, the employers and employees, are very much interested in the outcome of the decision process, whether it is wage increase or increase in working hour or increase in output or closing the factory, whatever it might be. So all of us are when become very much interested in the outcome of a decision process. It has been observed that in such type of situations, as power tactics, rational persuasion, inspiration appeal, consultation, these work better. And usually pressure does not work well. Pressure tends to backfire and usually typically the least effective, but anyway, there can be some situations where pressure works, as we find in the overall economic and political environment in the country. So pressure has no role that we should not say, but usually that backfires, people accept that practically under compulsion, they do not like it. Now, success will be increased or decreased by using of power tactics. Now again, I am not an expert in this particular field. Like you, I have a little bit of knowledge in organizational behavior, and so I am sharing my understanding. So I am depending once again on the experts. The experts say, I'm not very sure about it, that it has been observed that when we use 2 or more power tactics together, then chances of success are more. Or sometimes using one power tactic after another particular power tactic. So taking 2 or more power tactics together, that doesn't mean we can take consultation and pressure together. Something those may not be compatible. Appropriate relationship must be there. Taking 2 or more power tactics together or arranging 2 or more power tactics in a sequential manner which are compatible to each other, these type of power tactics we must select, then only we become successful. For example, experts have said, very interesting example I'm giving you, ingratitude and legitimacy can play a very interesting role. What role? For example, I am the boss. I want to dictate the outcome, but I do not want to express it explicitly. But you, the other persons, you are intelligent enough because you could guess based on what? Because I appear to dictate outcome. So when I'm the boss, I appear to dictate outcomes, then there can be some negative reactions so far as the subordinates are concerned. In order to reduce that negative reaction, it has been observed by the researchers that ingratitude and legitimacy, these play a major role. So I'll come to the point once again. I am using power. I want to dictate the outcome openly or implicitly. Then when I want to dictate the outcome, other may like it, may not like it. But the whole thing, it appears that I am trying to dictate outcome. So obviously when it appears, then there will be negative reactions. Then in order to reduce that negative reaction, it has been observed that ingratitude and legitimacy can play a major role. But it has always been seen that effectiveness of some power tactics, that depends on another factor, which we discussed at the very beginning, but then told we will take it later on. That is the direction of influence. Usually, there are 3 types of influence. Usually, one type of influence is usually there are 3 types of influence. That is upward influence, downward influence, and then lateral influence. And then it has been observed that the influence increases in multiple directions depending on upward or downward. I'm just giving you some examples. Say I am the subordinate, you are the superior. Imagine a very simple situation. I, the subordinate, I want to influence you. Then the influence is upward influence. In these type of situations, it has been observed that rational persuasion works better. Then reverse the example. Say, I am the superior, you are the subordinate. I am trying to influence you. Naturally, this influence is downward influence. Here it has been observed there can be many techniques. In order of preference, in order of importance, those can be rational persuasion, inspirational appeal, and pressure. So when the subordinate is trying to influence the superior, usually rational persuasion is the best way. But when the superior is trying to influence the subordinate, usually in order of importance, rational persuasion, inspirational appeal, and pressure, these are very important. And then comes the importance of other things I'm just mentioning. I made a note of it. We've already discussed. Then comes consultation, ingratiation, exchange, legitimacy. But what about lateral influence, horizontal influence? I'm in the marketing department, you are in the production department. We are in the same level. I am trying to influence you. Or both of us are in the production department, in the same level and layer. One is trying to influence the other one. It has been observed that in order of importance, the most important things are rational persuasion, personal appeal, and coalition in order of importance. And again, according to the researchers like Robbins and others. Then comes the importance of consultation, ingratiation, exchange, legitimacy, and so on. So friends, note that all these situations are valid in our own organizations. Some of the research findings have been journalized after a lot of research in different types of organizations in different countries, in different cultures all over the world. We can discuss only this generalized outcome, but in a particular situation, these may remain valid, these may not remain that much valid. This we must keep in mind as teachers of organizational behavior. Again, there are also other factors which affect the effectiveness of this influence or power. Sometime back I told you that we will be using the word influence and power interchangeably. So there are some other factors which also affect effectiveness. I put it in this way. The most important point is, say, out of these 9 power tactics, sequencing of power tactics. Say I'm going to use 3 power tactics, but which after what? That is important. Second part is important, that am I a person who is skilled enough in using the power tactics? If I do not have the right type of skills in using the power tactics, then I will make a mess of it. And another important point is that in your next session's discussion matter, we will finish with that. Organizational culture. What type of power tactics are more suitable in a particular type of organizational culture? That is also important. We'll come to that. And again, power tactics can be further categorized. Soft tactics and hard tactics. By soft tactics, we mean that my intention is not to harm others, and yet I promote what I want to do. What I want to do, I stick to that, but without any intention to harm you. Hard tactics. I want to reach my goal, fine, but sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, I may hurt you. So influence is likely to be more effective, the experts say, that if it begins with soft tactics. And usually, I'm again using the word very carefully, usually the softer tactics emphasize on personal power. That means, some example, your personal appeal, your inspirational appeal, your rational persuasion, your consultation. So taken together, these are some of the examples of personal power, though there is some overlapping areas, no doubt about it. But if these fail, experts say, then one can move to the harder tactics. What are the harder tactics? According to them, exchange, coalition, pressure, and so on. So here, gradually the formal power will come into the picture. We never say that personal power is always equal to personal appeal, inspirational appeal, rational persuasion, or consultation, but it is more like that. We never say that formal power is equal to exchange, coalition, or pressure. But it is more or less coming to that. So more I am emphasizing the harder tactics, that means I am emphasizing on formal power. I may become successful, fine, but the possibility is that incurring greater costs and greater risk. That possibility is there also. Now the experts have come to a very interesting list. They say, one single hard tactic combining with two soft tactics have been found to be very effective. Then the question comes, which hard tactic? Which two soft tactics? That depends on the situation. Or a single soft tactic along with that rational persuasion is more or less a soft tactic, no doubt about it, is more effective than a single hard tactic. And then they have come to another suggestion, a combination of hard tactics. Now, if we repeat again, a single hard tactic and we combine two soft tactics. Now, what hard tactic we are going to select? Which two soft tactics we are going to select? That depends. Or a single soft tactic, obviously rational persuasion must be there, is more effective than a single hard tactic. Then which single soft tactic? Which single hard tactic? That is debatable. Or a combination of hard tactics. Which hard tactics? So broad, their research findings are based, have been journalized after a lot of research all over the world in different organizations. But things depend on your particular situation. So the effectiveness of the power tactics also depends on you. You means the target, my target. I am trying to exercise power, you are dependent on the power, you are my target in management language. So effectiveness will also finally depend on you also. Now some people, say subordinate or colleague or others on whom I am trying to exercise power, we are calling them as some people. Some people who comply with soft power tactics, it has been observed that they are more intrinsically motivated. We are not having a sessional motivation, you had a sessional motivation, you know intrinsic motivation. Usually it has been observed that those people have very high self-esteem and those people have a greater desire for self-control. For them, softer tactics or soft power tactics work better. But there can be other people who comply well with hard power tactics. Usually it has been observed they are extrinsically motivated. You know the distinction between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Usually those people are found to be more action-oriented. And they are more focused on getting along with others rather than doing things on their own way. So again, through some further research, it has been observed that for some people, target in our language, soft power tactics will be more useful. For some people, hard power tactics will be more useful. But then comes the debate, which soft tactic, which hard tactics, that again depends on the situation. We are talking about the research findings in a very generalized manner. So then people, another issue, organization culture is another issue in our next session. People in different cultures, they prefer different power tactics. Very interesting point. Here, I'm not talking about organizational culture. I'm talking about social culture, country culture. Some cultures may be, I'll elaborate, some cultures may be more individualistic, like the Western continental cultures, where people see power in personalized terms, where people see power as a legitimate means of advancing their personal aims. I have the merit, so I must be promoted. That's the culture there. Not that, no one should come in the way. But in the collectivistic cultures, say in some of the Eastern Oriental countries, people consider power in social terms because we want to get along with people. That is our socio-psychological need. So we focus more on social terms, and that we consider as a legitimate means of helping others. So individualistic cultures and collectivistic cultures are not same, that we must keep in mind. For example, the US managers, they prefer more rational persuasion, where the Chinese managers prefer more coalition. These differences are consistent with the values of the two different cultures. So this is a part of our discussion when we are talking in terms of power and politics, but a little bit of these things will also be touched upon when you are going to have your next session on organizational culture. The reason is, say I am from US In US, we have seen people, they prefer more direct confrontation. They prefer more rational persuasion to influence others to resolve the differences. So, but say a typical Chinese, they prefer meeting difficulties, they prefer meeting controversial requests with indirect approaches. That means Western, Eastern, continental, Oriental. So in the Western continental individualistic cultures, people are more engaged in self-enhancement, self-promotion. I have the merit, so I should be promoted, nothing wrong in it. And then, but in the Eastern Oriental collectivistic cultures, and that is important, but getting along with people, that is also more important. So these are very subtle things I'm just touching upon. We cannot have a full session on these. Now, when we'll go through the famous textbook by Robbins, Judge, and Vora, they have made it politics, organizational power, and politics. Politics is something, power in action. So we differ with each other in terms of political skill. Political skill in a very simplistic manner, forget about the political parties we come across. In a very simplistic manner, my ability to influence others in such a way so as to enhance my objectives. It has been observed, whether we like it or not, politically skilled people are more effective users of power tactics. That's true. Forget about the political parties we come across. But even in our day-to-day life, organizational life, family life, everywhere, they can use power tactics in a better manner who have that type of political skill. So don't use the term political skill in a negative sense as we normally do, coming across the activities the political parties around. They also appear to be more effective. The people who are having political power, they appear to be more effective when their stakes are very high. So be it controlling COVID, be it becoming #1 in all over the world or whatever it might be it claiming that there is no unemployment in the country, be it claiming that this GDP growth rate will soon become very high, whatever it might be. Say I am talking from a position, government position, whatever may be my position. Then if my stake is very high to influence people, then I will be more oriented towards using political skills, because ultimately I become accountable for the important organizational outcomes. I am the head of the family. I am the chief of the organization. I am the chief of the country. Ultimately, I become accountable for the outcomes. So naturally, my stake is very high. Naturally, I will have a tendency to use power tactics more. Forget about the national, political, global context. Come down to a particular organization where we are working. So politics usually has become a dirty word in our day-to-day language. But in organizational behavior, politics means power in action. This is very important. It has been seen that politically skilled people, they are very competent to exert their influence without others detecting it. Very important. I am trying to influence you. If you become aware of it, then I will not become that much of successful. But if I have developed the ability to influence you without others detecting me, then I am more politically skilled and I become more effective. So these political skills become more effective again. A very negative example I'm giving. In the environments where the procedures are not that much strong, where the distributive justice is not that much strong, then I get the opportunity to say, don't worry, I will do it for you. Then people will depend on me. Forget about the external politics, even in the organization. But in the organization, if there is the level of the procedures, very low level, not very good procedures are there. Distributive justice is not there. There are some people having political skill. If they want to use power, they can go to that extent. But it has been seen in the organizations which are running with some open systems, some fair systems, some openly or fairly applied rules, rather free from favoritism, nepotism, biases. Their political skills do not play that much role, do not have that much of importance. So when I'm rating your job performance, you have done well, so you will be promoted. There's no question of my personal judgment. But because the organization is a system like that, you know very well the organization culture is that if I work well, I'll be promoted, I will get increment. So no question of favoritism. So there, this type of political skill, oh, don't worry, I will I will tell my boss about you so that you will be promoted. These type of skills will not be at all necessary. These skills get importance because of low levels of procedure and low levels of distributive justice. In the countries where these things are too much, political skills become important too much. It may not happen in case of the prime minister. I'm not sure about that lady, whether she's prime minister or president of Germany. Like you and me, she goes to market. She pays for everything she's getting in the market. And she is not enjoying special positions. So people can talk freely to her. She's a physicist, doctorate in quantum physics. So, but in many other countries, the political power enjoyed by the persons, they become bit dissociated from people. People do not have the freedom to discuss issues with them, and sometimes they may also like people's views. They give the impression that they are always following the people's views, but many times they do not like the people's views. Only the other day I came across a WhatsApp message regarding that lady, the German prime minister or the president. I forgotten the designation. Very simple. Along with her husband, after buying something from a shop, she is coming out. No special status for her. For each and everything she is using, she is paying for that. Be it telephone, be it car, not at the social cost, public. So the question of importance of political skill will increase or decrease. That depends on the situation. But when I'm using power, political skill has got a role to play. So when people come together in any group, power will be exerted. There is nothing unusual in it. People want to create or find a place where from people will exert influence. So I'm in a group. I will always try to find a place where from I can exert my influence or earn my rewards or advance my careers. That's quite natural in human life. So when the employees convert their power into action, they are described as they are being in politics. But if I am having good political skills, that will certainly give me the ability to use my power basis effectively. So organizational politics has been observed as suggested by Robbins. I've taken those words from Robbins. It focuses on the use of power to affect decision making in an organization. Organization politics plays a major role in affecting the decision making in an organization. It focuses on, now come the negative part of it, it focuses on self-serving behavior, own interest, and organizationally unsanctioned behavior. Certain things are not legally permissible, not organizationally sanctioned, but you are asking for that advantage. I am having some power. I am giving you that advantage. Maybe in a very negative sense, but this is a clear example of organizational politics. So this, whether we criticize organizational politics or not is secondary, but the organizational politics plays a major role when you talk in terms of power. Now almost the last end of our discussion, perhaps your last slide also, organization culture. There will be a full session on organization culture. I should not enter into it, but I'm just mentioning few points. From organization to organization, cultures vary, and all of us know it very well. Some organization cultures are very warm, relaxed, and supportive. Some organization cultures are very formal and conservative. Some organization cultures encourage participation and consultation. Some organization cultures encourage reason. Some organization cultures rely more on pressure, whatever it might be. Maybe a combination of these things. I've just stated only the extreme points. Real life is not that much extreme with respect to any particular point. We can have a combination of so many things in the organizations which we are serving. So organization culture is very important, where power plays a major role, but that's a different issue. Now, our point is that, say I have joined an organization or I am in an organization. If I fit in the organization culture, maybe what different types of culture I've just mentioned, then I'll be able to obtain more influence. It has been observed that people who are mainly extroverts, usually they are more successful, more influential in team-oriented organizations. Research finding. Again, it has been found that people who are guided by their inner sense of what is right or wrong, principled persons, it has been observed that they are more influential in organizations which value working alone in specialized tasks. Now, these two differences, these team-oriented organizations and some organizations which value working alone and in specialized tasks, these represent different types of organization cultures. So it is important whether my style matches with the requirements of the organization culture. Then I'll be able to use more power or less power. People who fit the organization culture, that part is very important, they become influential because they perform very well in the domains. Say, I'm very much competent in marketing. You are very much competent in finance. That's the first thing. Second is that in that particular organization, for example, finance is more important. So I will not be able to exert that much of power. You will be able to exert. Or in that particular organization, marketing is the main domain. Then I will be in a position to exert influence. So people who feed the organization culture become more influential because they perform particularly well in the domains which are most important for success in that particular organization. And more so, if I am very competent in that particular domain. So that is one side of the story, how the individual can fit in. On the other hand, the organization culture can also influence the use of power tactics. That is another area which we cannot enter right now because we must finish immediately. So one or more power tactics we have discussed, 9 power tactics. How the one or more power tactics are relevant in difference about types of organization culture that you have just mentioned. On the other hand, if we put the whole thing from a different angle, the organization culture itself will also influence one or more power tactics. Organization culture will determine which particular power tactics will be acceptable for use. So dear friends, we have discussed enough in a hurry, organization power and politics, and in fact, I told Dr. Amit Singh that I will mention about the textbook that I've given in your slide. This is the textbook for all of us, those who are doing advanced research in organizational behavior, those who are teaching organizational behavior for a long time. For them, also this book is a basic book, but certainly they are using or will use some more advanced books. But for those who are not teaching organizational behavior or will be teaching organizational behavior, for them this book is the basic book to my understanding. Previously it was by Robbins only, Stephen P. Robbins. Later on, Timothy, a judge, has joined, and our Niharika Madam, Niharika Voran has joined. The last Indian edition I've come across, 16th edition 2018 by Pearson. And I have made my discussion based on part 3, that is on the group, and on chapter 13, power and politics. This is what I should have communicated. Now it is up to you to interact, dear participants. Thank you all for giving me a patient hearing. Yes, Dr. Amit Singh, now we can take a few questions or a few clarifications.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for your very exciting lecture. And not only lecture one, guidance. And sir, we are so thankful that we receive always your guidance, not only for this lecture, even in UGC related meetings, AICT meetings, and for all other activities. I would like to tell the participants that sir is not just delivering this lecture, but he is the mentor of our department. And he always help in establishing the management department. But sir always tell us, don't tell all those things. But sir, without telling how I can justify myself, and you didn't give chance to explain about yourself.
No question.
But whatever we are getting from ICSR, AICT, UGC, all is supported by you. We are so thankful to you. And for the questions, sir, most of the participants are appreciating your lecture only. Very informative session. They are asking to share the PPT. And if anyone is willing, 1 or 2 questions we can take up.
Certainly.
Yes.
I seek apology from the participants because due to certain technical difficulties, in fact, right now I do not have any laptop. So I had to use my smartphone only. So I could not share screen. That's why I mailed the main points earlier to Dr. Amit Singh, who is kind enough to share that with you. But I confined my discussion to those points only. Okay, dear participants.
Yes, most of them are asking PPT, sir. And even if they have any question, they can mail me. I will compile the questions and
Certainly, certainly.
yes, sir.
And because the next session, I have seen your program structure, the very next session is on organizational politics, organizational culture. So I thought that I must finish with organizational culture just
Yes.
to find out a link.
Sir, one question can we ask?
Yes, why not?
Sir, with the permission, in a organization, positive groups like in the international environment, people like UK or Philippines or Middle East, they try to join together and form into a group. Whether they play politics or not, we are concerned, but forming into groups and performing in the organization is good or bad by not involving others into that group.
A very interesting question. I think perhaps this will be touched upon better if I remember your program structure very well. There is one session, maybe by Professor Nimit Chaudhary on the very last day, cross-cultural communication. This is very important. That means increasingly we are becoming global, and in all organizations, even within the country, in a particular organization, we have persons from different regions, different culture, different food habit, different way of speaking, language, and all that. And that is increasingly becoming true all over the world. Someone from Middle East, someone from Philippines, and all that. So they come into a group. And this question of power, politics, all these things will come. Well, then the issues which will crop up. Say I am from individualistic culture, for example, you are from collectivistic culture. Well, initially some difficulties will be there in terms of communication, cross-cultural communication, using our power, some amount of psychological conflicts and clashes. But over a period of time, that will keep on reducing compared to our days when we were young people. Traveling from India to some other country was sort of a myth. Nowadays, even for ordinary things and small things, forget about this present COVID situation, people who can afford are holidaying in foreign countries. So coming across with different cultures from all over the country and in different parts of the world is increasing, and that has become an important variable, no doubt about it. So our understanding of power and use of power will vary significantly if we could have used that concept in our lecture. The impact of in management literature all over the world I've come across in conferences also. Sometimes they use it cross-cultural, sometimes they use it international management, sometimes they use the term comparative management. But the meaning thereby, trying to integrate the socio-cultural issues from different parts of the world. This is a very important variable you have talked about. Well, that will influence. In our session, we won't be able to discuss, but I request Dr. Amit Singh, through Dr. Amit Singh, before discussion made by our Professor Nimit Chaudhary, dear Amit can have a talk with him. Sir, in course of your discussion, you, while focusing on this cross-cultural communication, please touch upon this aspect also.
Yes, sir.
Because discussion will only be complete after we know something about cross-cultural communication. He's a right person, I know, very knowledgeable person.
Yes,
Yes. Any other query, question?
No, sir. So thank you so much, sir.